Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Jeremy Barlow. He's the Senior Director of Demand Gen at Diligent. Jeremy, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Jeremy, for folks who aren't familiar with you, I'd love for you to share a little bit of your backstory in marketing and what you and the team at Diligent are up to these days.
Yeah, no, I would love to. So actually, my start into marketing actually begun with sales, doing some pretty low-level sales, hitting the phones, doing a bunch of cold calling and whatnot. And eventually, part of that role, I got promoted to manage, the small sales team. And part of that job was actually sending out the marketing emails every morning back in the day with Exact Target. And then from there, it kind of snowballed. I got more and more interested in marketing, and I kind of brought me to where I am today, fully in demand gen. I'm a pretty big tech nerd when it comes to the marketing space. And then when it comes to Diligent, what we're doing here is we believe we have built the leading enterprise government management system, which is essentially a suite of corporate governance software solutions meant to improve the lives of board members, senior executives, and really anyone involved in corporate governance, with the mission of improving governance and organizations, making it easier and more collaborative for, basically leaders to work and make more effective decision making.
Awesome to hear your story from moving from sales to marketing. I'm with you on kind of the tech junkie piece. I've always been kind of, I don't know if I'm a marketer living in a salesperson's body or vice versa, but I've kind of weaved in and out of both sides, which is good, I think, for folks like us, because I think the functional roles are kind of merging, or at least they should be. And that actually segues nicely into what we're going to talk about today. A lot of folks have been talking about sales and marketing alignment, which we've talked about and had some great conversations about that topic here on this show. But we're going to take a different angle. We're going to be talking about sales and finance alignment, because you guys have seen some pretty great results in taking a look at this relationship between these two functional roles. So a lot of people are talking, like we said, about sales and marketing alignment. Why do you think it's important to talk about finance and marketing alignment?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And yeah, so like you said, everyone has been talking about for years now the importance of sales and marketing alignment, which obviously is incredibly important on getting the two to function towards, a common goal of bookings. But I would contest that the relationship with finance would be equally as important as the one with sales, and one that we take pretty seriously here at Diligence. The reason I think that is so important is that ultimately, the same way that, I think old marketing departments were focused on leads and sales was focused on bookings, and that created a friction there that wasn't healthy. And now marketing departments are moving to being on the same, goal as sales with bookings. That was important because it got you closer to the metrics that actually mattered to the business. I would say that the getting closer with finance gets you even closer to the business metrics that matter, and aligning marketing to ensure that, we're working towards those same common goals that help the business run more effectively. So our alignment with sales is bookings, and I would say our alignment with finance are other type of metrics, depending on your business. For us internally, we look at things like our CAC, right? Our customer acquisition costs, our payback periods, and how profitable we're being overall with the marketing spend. And that alignment that we've been working on over, I would say, the last year to get better and better at has helped us in understanding and getting finance on board with the way that we're spending money, what we're getting back for it, and then a tighter alignment on how we fund the business and the marketing department specifically to make sure that we're meeting our growth targets.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on something really good there. I think all of us, especially if you're a marketer in SaaS, then you know LTV to CAC, lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. Andrea Kale, the CMO of Upserve, was talking about approaching your marketing budget very strategically a while back in a previous episode, and she touched on that point that you reiterated here, is that payback period is also a very, very important piece to that equation, and we shouldn't just leave it at those two variables. So I think that was a great point. Tell us a little bit, Jeremy, about where you guys started in developing a better relationship with finance and how that's evolved over time.
Yeah, so where this kind of started off was roughly about a year ago, where I should make a mention that our marketing department is driving a majority of the bookings that are coming from the organization, and spending a decent amount, daily on digital activities predominantly, even though we're also doing a lot offline and in other areas. But predominantly with that online spend, we were seeing huge fluctuations and the ability that we were getting a ton back from it. And then our CEO basically started to pressure us with, well, if we're getting this kind of return on things and this kind of payback period, then why aren't we upping our spend there and spending more in these different areas where we're getting a great return? Why don't we up that? Right. The response was, well, that's outside of budget, which created this interesting friction of then the question to finance, well, then why aren't we giving their, increasing their budget? Why aren't we giving them more towards these different initiatives that are obviously working? And this push from the CEO basically forced finance and marketing to work together to build out a reporting structure that we both aligned on and agreed on to make sure that we, not only from the marketing side are we understanding what finance really cares about and how they operate, but equally as important, I think, is finance understanding how marketing is tracking this information and how we're building out our reporting to say, I spent this $1 and I brought you $2 back, right? So that was an incredibly interesting exercise to build out this common reporting system with, one head from marketing and one head from finance kind of putting this together. So we had both sides looking at it. And ultimately, the point of it, right, it was to better understand how we're spending, what we're getting back for it, and then be a lot smarter about how we're, not only smarter, but I should also say agile with how we're funding our demand gen activities and thinking about how quickly we can shift either spend up or down based on different metrics that we're seeing that we both agree are correct and the ones that we should be paying attention to.
So did you guys get into a more regular cadence of heads of marketing and heads of finance meeting together? What did that cadence and what did those meetings look like a little bit?
Yeah, so we actually, once we built out this reporting structure, we actually twice a month, at the very least, I should say, twice a month, do a catch up, not only with the heads of marketing, but also the heads of finance, and something that our CEO puts together and sits in with as well. And we discuss how we're trending in different areas, particular channels where the majority of our spend goes to, and then think about how do we want to, make next steps in terms of how we spend based on how that's evolving, right? So it is a very regular meeting that's not only just around spend and whatnot, but also, how is the pipeline growing? Is it growing? Is it going the right way? How much have we spent to get to that? Are there areas we can pull back? Are there areas we should pull more into? And getting everyone together and aligning on that has brought some pretty powerful conversations that I actually personally have never been a part of. To give it an example, right? We mentioned before our payback period. The golden metric in SaaS is that 1 year payback. So if we use that as kind of a benchmark, what was our goal for marketing with finance? Is it to get to or underneath that and hold a profitability metric, or are we willing to spend higher than that to fund more growth? So that's been a really interesting conversation to have the marketing, sales, finance, and even our CEO in that meeting having that conversation. and seeing how that goes.
What were you guys doing before? What was the cadence between marketing, finance, and the CEO? Was it, hey, we set the annual budget, we might review that a couple times a year? Was it really just increasing the frequency of conversations that were already happening in addition to building those common metrics, that common dashboard together? It sounds like those were maybe the two levers that caused the change, right?
Yeah, so it's not, I wouldn't say it's just, the frequency, absolutely, right? We're meeting far more frequently than we did before. Not only at Diligent, but even my past positions, meetings with finance were, quarterly at best, where we're looking at how we're doing against our budget. And it's just, that's all it is. Are we spending too much or are we spending too little? Not really a dynamic conversation about how we should be thinking about things. Now, not only is our cadence more often, but it's actually a more constructive conversation that we think about the strategy of the company and how that should affect marketing, how we should be going about it. And we've actually had the situation, which a lot of marketing people I think would find it shocking at times, where finance will come to us and say, we see this area where we're not doing as well. If we gave you extra dollars in these areas, would you be able to drum up some more there? So it's created a really fun dynamic that is ever evolving. Where we are now, I feel like we'll be antiquated for us in 6 months, right? We'll be thinking about this differently.
Yeah. Well, that leads into another question I had, Jeremy, is where do you see the future of this partnership between marketing and finance going? What's kind of the next evolution look like, do you think?
Yeah. So where I see it now is, refining that model, better understanding it, but then taking it from what is now a reactive, like this has happened, so we should do this, to a more predictive world where we can understand, like, based on how we're doing, we believe this is going to happen. And we can start thinking, months down the road instead of retroactively, right? So if we see the way that we're spending, that we're building this kind of pipeline, we can predict that if this continues, we'll be at this amount. Should we start hiring more sales reps or more SDRs before the demand is there, so we don't hit that threshold where we can't handle the amount? I think that's kind of where we're going and being more of a predictive organization.
Yeah. We've talked about that as a fast growing team ourselves. How do you build the runway right in front of the plane as it's starting to gain speed on the runway? Like you want a little bit more than just a couple of inches as it starts to really get going faster, right?
Oh, totally. And, I've been in places before where marketing, we had our reporting to say like, oh, this is happening. And we would point it out. But I would say it's far more powerful having finance understand deeply our reporting structure, be able to have a handle in it and have a shared belief and like, this is the true north, right? So they can get more behind it, right? Because it's a scary thing to do what you're kind of talking about, right? Like, is it going to continue to build that way? Do we want to hire? Because the last thing you want to do is overhire, right? And have too many people. So I can't stress enough how important it's been to include them in a shared reporting structure.
Yeah. Awesome, man. So to recap some of the things that you said, more frequently with finance, but also not only more frequently, but take the conversation from just are we spending too much or too little, into talking strategy, looking at results and thinking about those dynamically together. What are some of the things real quick to leave listeners with, Jeremy, on the metrics? Again, if you could touch on those real quick, just a few that as they maybe start to look at how they could implement this tighter alignment between marketing and finance on their team, what would be some of those metrics you would recommend? Hey guys, this needs to be on that shared dashboard. If you could share a few.
Yeah, so from a high level, right, CAC is one that we look at. Obviously, we also look at payback periods. One thing we've started to do is look at payback periods on a monthly basis, right? So like, we spent this much in January. This is the amount of leads that we got from that, and then track through in the subsequent months what we're getting from that, right? To understand what our payback period is and how it's kind of evolving over time. And we actually go down not only from the monthly view, but we do monthly for each of our channels. We can go even deeper into those channels and see things like keywords and whatnot. So it's a pretty large model with a lot of abilities there. But from there, right, it allows for a lot of flexibility to understand the business. Another one that I forgot to mention probably is, LTV, like you mentioned in the beginning, is another one we pay some attention to as well.
Yep, absolutely. And looking at those and also looking at how they're trending, which informs the strategy conversation. So I think that's what's important, just like the spend, not looking at, are we spending too much or too little, but why are we trending in some direction, whether it's CAC, LTV, spend, whatever the case might be. How is it trending? Because that informs the strategy conversation that you want to have and is actually leading to the better results. So I love that, Jeremy. Man, this has been a great conversation. I feel like we've got a new trending topic. We're going to start here right on B2B growth. That's finance and marketing alignment, marketing and sales alignment. We got it all figured out. No, not really. But I think you make a great point that this is just as important and can lead to some phenomenal results. So if anybody listening to this would like to stay connected with you, ask any follow-up questions on some of the things you guys have been doing, what's the best way for them to reach out or stay connected with you, Jeremy?
Yeah, to reach out to me on LinkedIn is probably the best way. Jeremy Barlow at Diligence Corporation. I'm sure you'll find me on LinkedIn pretty easily there. And if you have any interest in Diligent itself, obviously our URL is diligent.com.
I love it. Jeremy, thanks again for being on the show today, man.
No, thank you. Really appreciate it. It was a great time.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. You know, all those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.